us on the EPS Happy Hour. Erica Virvo of Nomadic Matt, welcome.
Uh, well, I feel like you need to introduce me like as I walk into work every day or as I like walk into parties or something like that. You always just talk me up so good. I love it. I'm doing
Um,
good.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, I'm sure that hasn't met you will feel the same way after you've had this chat. So,
Hope so.
how did you end up hanging around in Qatar as a foreign exchange student and get
Oh,
started on travel?
yeah, so let's just start with the context of that. Qatar, the country decided that or not the country, but the people in charge of education, and Sheikh Hamoza, who was one of the queens at the time, decided that she realized that it wasn't a great thing or very easy for families to let women go abroad to study. And that's like, there weren't that many universities in Qatar. So Sheikh Hamoza at the time, probably in, 2005, 2000s, like around 2000s, decided to create a whole campus of American universities. So it was called Education City. And my school at the time, Virginia Commonwealth University, was what is and was the number one public art school in the nation. And so they invited VCU to bring a portion of our arts program. And they basically brought interior fashion and graphic design. Those were three industries that weren't developed in Qatar. They had everyone coming in from outside to do those. And so they said, you know what? If we're going to like really empower the women of Qatar to like join the workforce and do these jobs, we have to like educate them. And so they brought my school over. 10 years in, there hadn't been any American exchange students, and I got really bored with my major and decided if I was going to finish it and get that degree, I would do it on an adventure. One free 2 week trip to Qatar turned into a semester in Qatar, which turned into a year in Qatar. And I've been to Qatar or a neighboring country every single year since 2008. So, like, all my friends, I typically go to Qatar, but when my friends get married in countries close, like Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Tunisia, I'll go there and I'll like sort of skip Qatar if it's not if it doesn't make sense for me to stop in Qatar. But I love going to Qatar. I've been there probably in and out of the airports like 18 or 20 times, which seems ridiculous.
But talk about it as a tour destination because I think it's one that a lot of the country collectors will have we'll say a cursory visit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always sort of preface traveling to Qatar like if I didn't know anyone in Qatar, you could spend 2 days seeing pretty much everything, 3 days if you want a day in the desert, and everything that's worth seeing. But if you know someone and they're willing to take you home or bring you to their friend's house or their cousin's house or something like that, I could live there for years, and it
Mm,
would be super fun. There's not a ton to do if you don't know someone. So I would really recommend, like, especially in this group, in every passport stamp, I would recommend trying to find someone that you could connect with on the ground that could actually take you to cool places, not just what like Souk Waqif is this like very Aladdin looking market, and you
mm,
can go smoke shisha there. There's the Pearl, where everything is a really fancy store. It's a new man-made island. Lots of my friends live there, but I mean, it's not anything you can't find in a lot of places. So what makes Qatar so magical is being able to go into people's houses, going into their like private mejlis, the rooms that just have couches around, and eating all the dates and meeting all the people. So yeah, that's what I would say. There's a few cool museums too.
so that launched you on travel in a totally different way. You think of a lot of American exchange students have their semester in Paris or Rome and go back and go on with exactly what they were doing, but that totally shifted your life. So talk about the before Erica and the after Erica.
Well, before Erica went to Qatar, Erica barely went anywhere, and I was made fun of as the person that was never going to travel in my family, because in middle school and high school, my parents used to sign me up for these summer trips, and every year they would lose like $1,000 down payment because
Mm,
I would back out last minute. And so I really just was fed up with my degree, and I was fed up with doing interior design. I really wanted to get to Africa. I know Qatar is not in Africa, but I wanted to get to Africa. I'd seen a performance on African dance, and I was like, I have to get to this continent. And so I decided I was going to quit college and go into the Peace Corps. And one of my professors was really sweet and basically took me to coffee and said, like, that's a really great idea, but they want a college degree, so you might as well finish this up.
mm,
And so that's when I decided, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it on an adventure. And I originally had done all the research for going to Rome, because that's what every art student will go to Rome.
mm,
And I got a free trip to Qatar. And when I went there, I was welcomed with such open arms, uh, because there were some exchange students that had come to my university at first. And so I befriended them. I told them, listen, I'm going to Qatar in a few months. I know nothing about it. I'll show you all around Virginia. I have a car. I have friends. Like, let me show you all around Virginia, and then you'll tell me all about Qatar, so I'm not a total idiot when I get there. And and so that's how it worked out. And after Qatar, my school paid for my trip, and I found out, me, the non-traveler, I found out, since all my friends were studying in Paris at the time, like from other schools, I could stop over in Paris, just pay the difference. It was like $120 to stop over in Paris for a week. And that was my spring break. And
mhm.
so I did that. My friends, who were really, sweet, friendly, good looking, spoke French, had like zero French friends. And I was just in awe that they were just hanging out with Americans all the time in France. And I had just had this incredible experience totally with a bunch of Middle Easterners that I'd never met before. I'd never met anyone that told me the stories or the kinds of cultural things that they were talking about. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to go to Rome. I want to go to Qatar. And so I completely changed course and decided to do that. And so I would say before, Erica was really scared. And then, after Erica gained a lot of confidence and also realized that the world was humongous, and for as many people going to Rome, there were no people that I knew of that even had talked about Qatar. Nobody I was talking to had known about Qatar before. And this was like 2008, 2007. And now people know, and there's the internet, and there's stories coming out of there. But before, nobody, when I applied to go to Qatar the very first time, I did all my research for Dubai, thinking it was Dubai. And then when I finally looked to like put in my application, I realized it said Qatar, and I was like, what's that? I was also like 19 at the time. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's incredible you did it and went forward with that, and your ability to positively jump into something. As you said, you researched the wrong destination, but you still went. And
Yeah. And it's so funny because one of the things I love about it is I loved my experience there. I had such an incredible, like, rich, like, cultural, just fun experience. Everyone basically welcomed me as their extra daughter, sister into their
mm,
families. They were like,
mm,
"Oh, you're here from America? What do your parents do? What does your
mm,
father do? Why are you here?" And I was like, "Oh no, they're not here. It's just me." And they were like, "Just you? Why?" That's so weird. Where's your family? And so they all felt terrible for me. And these friends had been friends for like years and years, like 2 decades at
yeah.
this time. And none of them were being invited to their family gatherings, but I was, because it was like, poor Erica doesn't have a family anywhere. Let her come.
And they're in a sense part of your family to this day. I remember last I
Oh
saw you,
yeah.
they were messaging you in your group. So you've
Oh
got this
yeah.
extended family, and
Oh yeah.
beyond there, you spend time, I think, about half a year in a destination that has me curious, St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Ooh, yeah, that's a beautiful place to be. I spent 9 months there,
Oh, wow.
6 months, and then 2 months. 6 months on St. Vincent, 2 months on St. Vincent, and then a month in Beckway. And I actually just went back to Beckway last year.
Mhm.
Really cool place. What do you want to know about it?
Why? Why were you there? What were you doing? It's one that a lot of islands I pop into, check out, but I just wouldn't think of
Uh,
depositing myself there long term.
yeah, I mean, there's honestly, again, there's not much to do unless you're doing something. So, one of the things that I love, or that I try to call myself and what I try to actually travel like is I travel for a purpose. Otherwise, I sort of get bored. And so, whether that purpose is like visiting a friend or going to school or something like that, I try to travel with a purpose because then I feel more grounded in understanding what I'm supposed to be doing there. Sometimes I go visiting places, but see, even then, like the purpose might be to spend time with the one person that I'm going there with.
Mm.
um Otherwise, I sort of feel willy-nilly and I don't really know what to do or how to connect with what I so St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for instance, I had Googled how to get to Africa for free. I was 22 at the time and living in Thailand with almost no internet, and trying to find my next move because my savings account was dwindling. And um, and so I found this program that basically told me that if I come to this tiny island I'd never heard of in the Caribbean, that I could spend 6 months in somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's a program that I don't love necessarily. I think it does some sort of strange stuff. I wish I had researched it a bit further, but it was a really cool experience. I lived on the edge of a volcano in a community service learning school. We did a lot of farming. We were about 5 minutes walk from the beach through the guava fields and through a bunch of
Mm.
different orchards, and we had pigs and horses, and we're doing all sorts of strange things. We could see St. Lucia from where we ate breakfast, and the
Mm.
volcano is right there. And I never actually hiked the volcano. I probably should have. Sufri is right there. But it's such a tiny, sweet island. Everyone knows each other. It's 120,000 people. When I went on a direct flight to St. Vincent last year. And so it was New York to St. Vincent. And it was the funniest experience because it was like 8 in the morning in New York. And the whole airport was just so tired and quiet until you get to the St. Vincent line when everyone's like, oh, hey, hey, because everyone knows each other. So it was really funny.
Oh, what
Yeah.
a fantastic experience. Yeah, that's was that Terminal 4 at JFK? They've shaped things up a bit, but there's a lot of us that love Terminal 4 for just this eclectic mix of airlines, and sometimes you just see a 300 person check-in line that doesn't seem to be moving, and wondering where is that going to? It might be a charter, it might be the flight to Baku, it could be
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such a unique experience because I feel like that was just that put a huge smile on my face knowing like, oh right, I'm going back to the Caribbean. Like this is so nice.
And do you visit the Caribbean often? For New Yorkers, there's a lot who go all the time.
No. I've only been to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia. And when I was there, I spent like a day in St. Lucia. My grandparents
Mm.
met me on a cruise of theirs. And then I spent like 2 days in Barbados couch surfing. I mean, I've honestly, for the amount of time I've spent abroad, I've seen very little country, very few countries. I've probably been to like 40 or 45 countries by now, but I've lived for like almost 5 years straight abroad in like 5 or 6 countries. So,
And
yeah.
what are the other ones then?
So, Qatar, then rural Thailand, Isan, like in Isan,
Mhm.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines, South Korea, Zambia, and then Costa Rica. I spent like a longer time in Costa Rica, Vietnam, Dubai, Qatar, South Africa, London. So like I've spent between 1 and 3 or 4 Cambodia months in those places. So I'm not like a fast traveler.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so pick a few of those that travel permitting, the digital nomad types. Which would you see as base? Some of them you clearly said you went for a social purpose, but as a
Mm-hmm.
digital nomad, that a whole selection of places you've been to.
I loved being a digital nomad in because I've worked abroad. I've worked remotely with Nomadic Map for a number of years now. And so everywhere that I spent a few months in, I was definitely working. I would say Vietnam was my favorite place to work by
Hmm.
far. I stayed in this place outside of Hoi An. And I basically worked from like 5 a.m. until noon every day, and then went to the beach, which was a few minutes walk, and then went to yoga class, went for a vegetarian meal with the yogis, and then I would go to sleep. And I was sort of staying in a place that was outdoors. You know, it had a roof, and a mosquito net, but it didn't have anything else. And spent a month there, and I absolutely adored that. And I thought that the digital nomad scene was pretty cool, and it was easy to work. Everything was cheap. People were sweet. Hoi An is cool. So I would definitely say there. I also tried to do that in Cambodia, but it's harder with the internet in Cambodia. I mean, not in general. I feel like in Vietnam and Cambodia, you'll find, Wi Fi problems or good Wi Fi, depending on where you are. But for me,
Ben Sand is asking, what length of time do you consider saying you lived somewhere as opposed to visited? Curious, since everyone has their ideas on it.
yeah. So I feel like there's not specifically a length of time. I feel like it depends on what you're doing.
Hmm.
So, if you're living like you're living there, you are going grocery shopping and you see the neighbors and you recognize the neighbors, and you're actually like doing a project or working, I consider that like living somewhere. That's why I say I stayed for like longer periods of time in places because I wasn't really living. Like I was in London for 2 months, but I was more like a tourist than I was living there. I didn't really know what was happening. I was, going to Covent Gardens and all the touristy places. But in let's say in South Korea, I was there for 14 months, and honestly, I barely left my neighborhood, or my let's say my city, and so I just like I got to know the place. I got to know where to go. I knew how to direct you in the city. I knew the people around. Like I would visit the same shops every day, and so I felt like I was living there.
And talk about South Korea. That's Devjit is one of the nicest guys. He's teasing. We're not going to do a flame more about the living. We there's been some debates about when people always say I did that country or whatever. So
Yeah,
try to avoid that. But
yeah.
South Korea is a place that I would like to potentially live at some point for the space of a couple of years. So talk about your experience there.
Yeah, so that's a cool one also for the living, for the question about living somewhere. Like South Korea, when I first got there, I was very confused. I was also very like put off by the fact that I really didn't know the language. I was teaching English there, and so it was really hard for me to get around. But about a month and a half or 2 months in, I just started falling in love with South Korea.
Hmm.
And the more I fell in love with it, the more I was able to like it opened up to me, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. And so,
Yeah, it's not a place where people are going to just grab you on the street. Hi, foreigner. Come do
no,
this with us. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no, I actually had I had a good idea in my head. Like if I really needed help, I'd just ask anyone under 10 years old. So I'd be talking to kids all the time on the street, and I'd be like, please Subway, where's the subway? Because they speak English. But I also felt sort of creepy doing that, but they always knew and they were always so helpful. So but South Korea is such an amazing place to live, and I think one of the most special parts of South Korea is, in my eyes, and again, I was there a few years ago, but when I was there, it seemed like everyone was in a couple. Like the couples culture was going strong. Everyone was always on a date, always in a couple, wearing couples outfits. But at the same time, dating was allowed, but like you lived with your family. So so you couldn't really go to your family's house or apartment, actually. You couldn't go to your family's apartment and like watch a movie or do like regular things you would do if you lived in your own apartment. So there was a whole like underground to like the naked eye. Obviously all the Koreans knew what was happening, but culture of dating. So there were like you know, everyone knows about the noraebangs, the karaoke rooms, but there were also DVD rooms where you could go watch movies. There were, you know, video game rooms. There were rooms that were just like a living room. So it would be like a room that they made all these fake walls and stuff. And then they put pillows and a little table. And then you would go get snack. You pay for like the hour or something. You would go get snacks and then you would go hang out in your own little like living room without a TV and just like talk to whoever you were with. It was so strange, but I loved it, you know, because like I don't think that exists here. That doesn't exist in Connecticut. I don't know, maybe in New York you can find that. But there were so many activities that you could participate in that seemed so familiar but also strange at the same time, and so it was a really cool dynamic. And you know, I befriended one of my best friends there is this yoga teacher named Miri. She took me to all these crazy things, like her mom's cooking class with a bunch of like 60-year-old Korean women at like the 40th story of some apartment building. Nobody spoke English and we were just making rice cakes at like 9 in the morning. We did some cool stuff. Yeah, but Korea is amazing.
It does seem a place where people live to the limits at times. It might not seem that way at first, but there's a lot of extreme personalities, and
Oh yeah.
it certainly is an overlooked destination. A lot of travelers prioritize Japan or China and forget about it in between.
I would say that if you do go to South Korea, Busan is such a cool place to go. You've been, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you like Busan? Like I like Seoul, but I feel like Seoul is very New Yorky and Busan is more like California or like a chiller destination. And so I know a lot of people like go to Seoul and then sort of get, you know, put off by how busy it is, but I always try to recommend people go to Busan because it's a little nicer and calmer.
And definitely more approachable. I took the I think it was a ferry I took from Qingdao in China at the time, and went there, and it yeah, but Seoul is a challenge in a sense like a Tokyo where there's not one specific center. There's so many centers, and the geography of Seoul does make it. I mean, it's a quarter of the country essentially, and the subway goes out to Suwon, it goes to Incheon. It's a giant thing. But yeah, these small towns. My father likes pottery, so I went to some small pottery town, Icheon, which is maybe an hour bus. The whole country, of course, is so well connected that any of these smaller areas are very fast to reach by bus or train. And times I would take the slower trains just because the fast trains were not too fast.
Yeah, Seoul is cool. Seoul is very cool. That's actually where my friend lives now, and I've only been there a handful of times. But I remember one of the weirdest things that happened was she told me we were going for coffee, and we started walking up a hill, like in the middle of the city, because there are so many hills and mountains and stuff. We started walking up a hill, and I'm thinking, okay, we're going to a coffee shop on top of the hill. And we keep walking. We get to the top of the hill, and there's no coffee shop. And I'm like, Miri, I thought you said we were going to get coffee. This is like an hour later. And she said, oh yeah, it's on the other side, like on the bottom, on the other side, which is like a city block to walk around. But we hiked up a mountain in the middle of the day with a bunch of people wearing suits
Yeah.
and working out on those little workout
Yeah.
machines. And then we had to walk down, and then we got coffee. But yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I was thinking about the living question. I feel like when I was an expat and I was in China for about 8 years, and it's like I sort of felt like it in the terms of after a year, you start really having to do all of the practical arrangements. You can't get by without, say, whatever local IDs or banking or
Mm-hmm.
these things and figuring out at home. And I miss the expat life. I want to go back to it at
Yeah.
some point, hopefully in the next few years. We'll see how we can make that happen. So let's talk about some of the professional stuff.
Sure.
You've done so many creative things, and uh, I haven't actually done any of my to-do items, but I saw a wonderful talk you gave on ebook publishing last June at TravelCon, the Nomadic Mat conference in Boston. So talk about all of these people that want to publish their either a guidebook. You worked on guidebooks. You've helped Matt with his memoirs, different types of books.
Yeah, sure. So I met Matt originally in 2013, and the reason he hired me was because he had all this content that he had written about certain places. So Paris and Stockholm and all these places that he kept writing about, kept visiting, or trying to live in or living in. And he really wanted to make it a guidebook, make them guidebooks or a little guidebook series, but
Mm-hmm.
he couldn't do it himself. He was, still blogging and all this stuff. So he originally hired me for this. And so in 2014, we published a bunch of guidebooks, and we kept sort of adding to them, and one on backpacking Europe, a huge one on Thailand, which is a real struggle to do research on Thailand. I went to Thailand to research it, and it's still a struggle finding all the accurate information. On Iceland. And so basically, we ended up with a guidebook series of about 10, actually, of 10. And then we had we had 3 other ebooks. And then, of course, How to Travel the World on $50 a Day was not an ebook, it was a published book. And Matt wrote his own memoir. I had nothing to do with his memoir, but I helped re-research some of the versions of How to Travel the World on $50 a Day. But basically, they're all ebooks. We publish them, self-publish them, put them on Amazon, put them on our website, and I had to learn a lot of things to be able to do that. So now I know how to make a file into a Kindle ready file, which is a very difficult process that involves coding.
Really? It's that difficult, huh?
Yeah.
What's the original format you're working in before you convert?
So we do everything in Pages because it's nice, and we use Apple. But basically, if you have something where you're just writing words, it's pretty easy to convert it into a Kindle. But these are guidebooks, so
Okay.
they've got charts, they've got photos, they've got all these crazy elements that go all wonky when you just use the regular,
Okay.
convert this to Kindle.
Uh-huh.
So I had to learn that. That was pretty impressive, I feel like, for me. But yeah, so I've done that, and it's been really fun, and I feel like it's a good skill to know these days because it seems like everyone I know is writing a book. My grandma even called me recently and was like, "Didn't you tell me you would republish my book of poems?" So I think I'll be using those skills for that. But other than that, I've worked with Nomadic Map for about 6.5 years now. So I've done a little bit of everything. I was the second person that he hired, aside from the tech guy that he's been using for forever. But I pretty much have done a lot of different things with Nomadic Matt, and I've learned so much about blogging. I've learned so much about the travel world. I've learned so much about travel media, and we've really grown Nomadic Matt to be so many different, to have so many different branches in the time that I've been there. So it's not just a blog. We also have our guidebooks, books, we have TravelCon, we have Superstar blogging courses. We now have the Nomadic Network, which is what I'm in charge of now. And that's a whole community dedicated to travel enthusiasts and travel lovers. And right now it's really exciting because, I mean, you're putting me to shame, Stefan, because you're doing these 5 days a week, but twice a week we have virtual events. And that's just been
I've
really
been
fun to
honored to be
do.
on one. Yeah.
Yeah, Stefan was fire when he came on our event because I feel like so many people were, I don't know if anyone's watching from that event. I feel like a lot of people must have joined after you talked up every passport stamp, but it's been really fun. We also had Rick, so your whole team.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we do a lot with Nomadic Matt, and the Nomadic Network is really like our community, for the community, by the community, in-person meetup, but now virtual meetup platform, so that people that when they love to travel, once they get home, they can actually like connect and plug into a travel community around them. Because I know that after I lived abroad, that was one of the most alienating things, was like trying to find anyone that traveled to talk to in Stamford, Connecticut. And I feel so bad for everyone at a bar that I ever met that said they went anywhere, because I feel like I latched onto them and tried to, be their best friend immediately. And didn't always
You
work
are
out.
from Connecticut, and our guest last week, Stephen and Shay Pepper, they're on a 5-year, 50-state road trip, and I pushed them to say the one state that they did not like. Yeah.
Connecticut is cool if they come in the autumn.
So talk about it. Talk about it. It's overlooked. Certainly, it's viewed as a commuter state by New Yorkers. It's not on many international tourist agendas yet. You could have a day trip from your hotel in New York if you really chose, or from Boston. So
If somebody did that, I would laugh so hard. Why, while you're visiting New York, you would go to Connecticut is beyond me. I
you're not going to
don't
work for their tourism board either.
know. I mean, there's cool stuff to do in Connecticut. It feels like if somebody came to Connecticut that didn't grow up there, that wasn't born there, they probably have much more to say about it. I think it's cool. I just don't like the idea that everyone there knows me or a family member. It feels very constricting, feels sort of like a time capsule, but I think that it's a great place to move to. Like, it's a nice, especially Stanford. Stanford's a nice like suburban town that like you can have a good life, but also it's not so sleepy. It's got an interesting set of bars and nightclubs and stuff like that. It has summer concerts, but I
Brian says
would say
clam pizza. Clam pizza.
clam pizza,
Okay.
Mystic Pizza. Are you
Okay.
talking about Mystic Pizza in
He says
Mystic,
pork
Connecticut?
clam pizza. So
Yeah, probably for Mystic Pizza, which is famous. I would say that if you want to come to Connecticut, you should come in the fall because the trees are incredible.
And how about New Haven and Yale University? There's, I guess, maybe a long-standing stigma about safety, but
I have
I
no
have not
clue.
been myself.
I have not been either. No.
So one of my goals in this interview series will be to find someone that the Connecticut Tourism Board will hire, but we will continue the search for that. But you threw out so many things that you've been involved in, and a lot of us are always interested in the inside workings of blogs and media and all that. So let's do rapid fire. Three things you said you learned a ton in. One is blogging. What have you learned a ton in blogging on?
I mean, I had never touched a blog before I met Nomadic Matt, so my learning curve was huge, and also I learned everything about blogging. So, what, like tips for bloggers? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, really, you said you learned a ton, so it's an open forum. Maybe I was thinking along the lines of Matt's background is in SEO, search engine optimization, and from my much more limited blogging, even without trying to do a ton, just the amount of work that needs to be done on a blog post, say the page excerpt and the featured image and that. I mean, how much of the time spent on any given post is for preparation for the search engines and social media channels versus the content writing?
Oh, I feel like that's split over so many people right now, but it takes a long time. And it takes a long time, even if Matt were to do it himself, and he's been doing it forever. So I would say from having a post that's written in a Word doc to putting it on the blog, it takes a good hour or two for anyone to do that because there's just so many different elements and you have to make sure that the images are, correctly done and everything. But I would say that one of the things that I guess a tip for bloggers, because I feel like a lot of bloggers out there are struggling to sort of, well, I wouldn't say they're struggling, but I feel like a good tip for bloggers is, once you write a post, to rewrite that post every so often, just so, or to refresh it, just so it's up to date, right? I watch so many people like spend hours or days writing a post, put it up, and then like 2 years later, it's getting no traction whatsoever, even though it may be a great post and it was super well researched in the beginning. It has no relevance now. And that's something that we always do with Nomadic Matt. He writes a ton of evergreen content, and we're always resharing posts. And one thing, and I feel like that there's a misconception if that happens in blogging, that you're like, sharing old stuff, but it's like you always have new people that are discovering it, and it's okay if somebody sees one post twice. They don't have to click on it. So I would say that that's a huge thing that I learned with him, and I think that that is a really a way that we get to stay ahead, because it's not like he has to continuously do these research heavy posts, but we have like incredible content. For example, we have guides on our website that are updated every 6 months to a year, and those guides are extensive. Now, if we had just said in the beginning, like, we're only going to do this kind of guide, and we're going to try to do it to every city in the world. Now, right now we have 250 cities and countries, but obviously there's so many more than that. And we don't cover everything, but we've redone those 250 guides multiple times so that if you like click on it, you don't just have information from 2012, you have information from 2020. And I feel like not a lot of bloggers catch on to that or do that. And so the content feels old and feels like you can't share it, when really, like, you're putting in all this work, you might as well have it live as long as possible, even if you have to put in another hour or two next year,
Okay. The next one you mentioned is the travel world.
The travel world.
What did you learn about the travel world?
Oh man, you're taking my words straight from my mouth. Well, I would say that a lot of my learnings from the travel world have just been that I came into traveling with like very bizarre places that I knew about. Qatar, St. Vincent, like things that I didn't ever get to share with anyone because nobody was knocking on my door saying, "Hey, can you teach me how to get to Zambia?" Nobody said that to me so far in my life. So I think just being exposed to so many different places that I still haven't been to, but I know of because of the sphere that I'm in. And a good example that should be relatable to this group is like when I met Rick, and I heard
Rick Kazarian.
Yeah, Rick Kazarian. I met him years ago. When I heard what he's been doing and I started following what he's been doing, I'm like, where are you ever going? I remember attending one of his meetups in Thailand, and he did a whole 15-minute presentation on Nargana Karbach. And I remember writing like in my journal, like, go to countries that aren't countries, question mark. And I have messaged him so many times asking him for more names of non-countries because it's so interesting to me. But like, if I said that Yeah, so it just like the travel world, right? The world, the travel world, the world. I just feel like I know more about the world having stepped into the space, you know?
I
And
think we've got the new audio intro for the for our group. By agreeing to this recording, you've given up all rights to
do it. Do it. He spoke about it. It's not Nagorno-Karabakh, right? Anymore?
that the name has changed, yeah.
Right. So he spoke about that on his when he came onto the Nomadic Network, and people were just like firing questions like,
Hmm.
spell that. I want to research that. And I'm like, I feel you. I totally get you because I was there. uh,
Uh,
so yeah. What's the third thing I said? The travel
travel
world,
media.
blogging. Yeah, travel media. What have I learned a ton? I feel like this is such a bizarre question because I feel like, and if you came to me with your blog or if you came to me with your idea, I could, help you consult on everything. And I have tons of examples of things that I've seen and things that I've seen work and that don't work, and directions you should go in, directions you shouldn't go in. Like, I have that kind of insight. I feel like that's very valuable. So it's not just like I could list off a bunch of facts. It's just sort of like I feel like I know a lot of people in this industry. And so it's very easy for me to think about, like, if you said, do you know anybody that runs tours? I could list you like 30 people that run tours. And you tell me another descriptor for that, that runs specialized tours, that runs retreats, that run, and I could, point you in different directions. And I'm a I'm a big connector, so that's one
I
of the
think
best things.
one of the challenges that people in our group have, myself included, is we're going to a lot of places, so we're not going to the same places over and over. And if we start blogging, then there's going to be one post on St. Vincent and Grenadines, but there's not going to be more necessarily. And then the next post is from another island and another island, and it seems like what works is the
Sorry.
blog, the blog about this region of Italy, or cooking this type of food, the ultra local and specialized. And you said Rick gave that talk in Nomadic Network about what is a country in all these different places. But it seems that generalist approach, especially in the search engine dominated world, is like the worst possible approach if you're trying to gain audience. So for a generalist, how can you convince them to be a specialist, or how to become a specialist out of a generalist?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Mhm.
So, first of all, I would say if you're not ever going back to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you should write more of a story than a how to.
Hmm.
Because if you write a how to, that has to be updated, right?
Mhm.
Because it becomes irrelevant very quickly. So, if you write about your story about St. Vincent, you could still mention places that you went, but in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I went manikou hunting at midnight with a bunch of Rastas. Manikou are possums, but they call them manikou, and then we made manicous too. I could write a whole
Mhm.
post about that, and that could be, you know, seen in search engines forever because whoever
Mhm.
writes about manikou hunting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which I will tell you, Anthony Bourdain covered that in his Caribbean episode, and I was
Okay.
so impressed because
Mm.
I feel like you really need to know a place well to go hunting with a bunch of Rastas at night. But so that's one thing. And those kind of posts, they're fine in the search engine because people will look that up, and it doesn't matter if it's old. That's like a tradition, right?
Mm.
That's
Okay.
evergreen content. But if you were to do a how to, that would be hard to keep relevant. And then another thing I would say is something that's very underutilized is bringing on guest posts. I feel like, or people that write guest posts, it does take quite a bit of effort from the blogger themselves to make a guest post what they want it to be. They may need rewrites and stuff like that. But by bringing on guest posters, you can have people writing about destinations that you're not going to again,
Mhm.
or that from perspectives that you can't give, right? So we have lots of guest posters on Nomadic Nat, and right now the Nomadic Network is all guest posters, because I feel like it's really important to hear it from a few people, right?
Mhm.
So if you were to go to Zambia 10 years ago, you could have somebody that went to Zambia for a different reason, or
Mhm.
that went recently, and so you have more content. And that's an incredible thing also, if you're like, say, pregnant or start a family, or um are, in the coronavirus, can't move, right? You
Mhm.
can still be publishing guest posts all the time. So there you go.
Fantastic. And you've got another recommendation, Sebastian. He lives in one of my favorite places in uh, the broadly Europe, UK, but not really in between land, we'll say. So he lives in Guernsey, and he's saying that if he doesn't say Guernsey as a country on all the documents, they won't process the paperwork. So I actually, Guernsey is one of my favorites, and it's a standard when I mention it in conferences. I'll say it's it's British culture and French food, and if you got the reverse, you wouldn't want to go. So, but
Yeah, I've never been there.
it's a wonderful spot, tremendous history, and the Nazis occupied it. So you've got those elements. You've got the
Oof.
forts. It's you've got gangs in a good way, gangs, not like violent criminal gangs, but just gangs of motorbikers that are around the island on these dirt bikes. It's a very uh, harsh climate, very windy, rainy, and that, and they just seem to be tooling around all the time in all weathers. So go to Guernsey and the Channel Islands, Erica, for one of your picks. You mentioned e-courses, so that seems to be a big trend. It's get people to pay for something, get a subscription, get an e-course. It seems daunting. People get really high quality video. They do it so well. Somebody that wants to get into e-courses, what are the steps, and is it doable for somebody alone?
Yeah, I think it's doable. There's tons of platforms out there. We created our own platform, so uh, you know, on the website, and so we didn't use anything like Teachable. But there's so many courses out there on Teachable. I think that uh, understanding who your audience is one thing. So asking people what you should write an e-course in, and then using their feedback to create the course, and creating that connection with people that are potential buyers of your e-course. You know what I mean? So like, if you were to teach something on like high level travel hacking, and I was at that point, I would definitely want to learn from you, because I already have a connection to you. I already know your stuff. And it's like, if I don't, I feel so bad texting you or messaging you with every travel hacking question I ever had. So like, if I could just learn from you, I'd rather do that. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is sort of creating a course that you don't know people want. So like, asking people, if I created this course, is that something you'd be interested in? What would you want included in it? And really getting the feedback um, from people that are potential buyers, or like, are your potential buyers friends or something like that, right? It's a
Yeah,
lot of word of mouth these days.
and it's hard to get to the point of asking people, especially people you know or your audience, to buy something. I feel like there's a lot of hesitation to put out a product and put a price to it and say, now my expertise, or now what I have to offer, it has that price tag.
Mm-hmm. Wait,
Yeah.
sorry. I just blanked. What did you say? I was reading the question.
Oh, sorry. I'll read the question. No, we have a chat feed, so we gotta log in. It, it I was saying seems like a lot of people have concerns about, they're used to doing things for free or giving advice, but now they're putting out a product with a price tag, telling their friends or audience about it and saying, now you're going to pay for this. And any thoughts about people concerned or how to transition to that
Well,
that
you can't really give all the information for free and then teach the same information. So you just have to build on to what you already have.
Mhm.
So, or package it in a different way. Like if I were talking to you, Stefan, you have a travel hacking blog,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to go read every post.
Mhm.
If you tell me that by buying your course, I'll earn 500,000 points in, 60 days, then great, because I'm not going to read every post. So if you repackage it in a different way and make it like more digestible,
Mhm.
then that's a thing. Or, for instance, we have a book that's called How to Teach English Overseas. Now, we
Mhm.
have a few blog posts saying it's really cool to teach English overseas. You can make money.
Mhm.
But we don't ever go in depth into how to get the job, what you should be looking for in salary, what nationalities you have to be. That's all in the ebook. You
Mhm.
can't find that on our website. So I would say that, there is no imposter syndrome if you're selling them a different product. If you're selling them the same product, then
Mhm.
I would feel weird about that too.
Mhm. And so the comment I think you were reading, Ben Sand, says, why don't more guidebook or websites hire people who are already in the countries that might need an update and pay them for a couple days work to check on things, uh, saves a flight ticket and would be more updated more regularly, could make a database where people sign up. So I don't know this industry well. It sounds like they're often hiring people outside of country to go in, but
Yeah, I honestly don't know the guidebook industry super well. I feel like a lot of guidebooks will do that, right? Like Lonely Planet and stuff. They have like the two or three authors of the books and they have their bios and they've been living there for many years or are from there. Um, I would say it's a it's tricky, right? Because with writing, especially, writing is an art. And so it's very difficult to say just because you live in this country, like, we trust what you're going to say and we trust that you're going to deliver it in a way that's like, easy for us to um, easy for us to republish and all of this stuff. So it's a bit tricky, honestly. Like, it would be one thing if we had met 193 people and,
Mhm.
at like journalism school. Yeah, that would be an incredible idea. But to just because you live in a country doesn't mean, and I mean, I guess there's probably ways around that. I don't know, I'm just thinking about it out loud right now.
Mhm.
But maybe if there was a guide to how you had to look it up, and I'm sure that's how Lonely Planet does it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
We only had 10 guidebooks, so we basically had Matt everywhere, right? Except
Mhm.
for just Thailand, because I was in Thailand at the time, so it turned into a work trip. um, but oh my goodness, who is Facebook user asking me to marry
Oh,
them?
oh yeah. So the streaming tool we use, it doesn't, because it's within a Facebook group. It doesn't always pull the names over. So Erica's seeing the chat without everybody's a Facebook user. But that's Michael is asking that. So
Oh.
we can take that as a compliment and pass on the relationship questions when they appear.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But for meeting people, the Nomadic Network, that's the new initiative that you're working on.
Yeah.
I'll put the link to events, which of course are virtual at this point, and in-person events happened once for the new chapters this year, pretty much, and then
Yeah.
moved to virtual. So talk about that, and also share Erica's profile and how you can connect with people on the network.
Yeah, sure. So the Nomadic Network is all about connecting people to each other. And we are going to start gatherings in person again. once we're allowed to, once it's safe to. And that whole idea is basically that you'll have a clan of people that are your people, your travel friends, like in your town or in your area, right? And the idea behind it and, you know, how we were executing it was some of them are happy hours, some of them are going to be picnics, especially now that it's safer to meet outside, you know. And by now, I mean later when we're able to gather. But some of them will be picnics, speakers. And so right now we're doing all sort of speaking engagements. Like Stefan came, Rick came, we had Gabby from Paxlight. We're having, Matt just did a book talk this morning. We have 2 events a week. One is Tuesday at 8 p.m. and the other one is Thursday at 12 noon. And we're just inviting a bunch of people. And the idea behind it is to just inspire you to travel more. I don't think that this group needs to be inspired to travel more, but it also gets you thinking like about traveling in a different way. You know, our speaker on Tuesday night is Heather, who won our trip. We did a giveaway, a big giveaway, for the 3rd version of How to Travel the World on $50 a day, and we gave away $50 a day for a year, so $18,250 for some person that, you know, wrote a 500-word essay about why they wanted it to go travel the world. And so she's going to be speaking about it, about her big trip from 2018. And so that's what we're sort of just pulling in very inspirational people or people that are doing something differently, people that want to teach about something to a travel community. And it's been going really well so far. So that's what the Nomadic Network is. And I encourage you to come on and to, you know, make a profile. We have an events tab. We also have a forum. I would love for some Every Passport Stamp people to be in our forums because there's lots of questions there and I feel like you could answer them.
They're all mourning the loss of Lonely Planet Thorntree. It's just been a slow death for a number of years and now a full death.
Mm-hmm.
But forums are not dead. You launched a forum. You're
Forum.
committed to them.
Yep. We've actually had a forum for many years, but we just connected it to our new website because we want it to be like an all-in-one. This is your travel community, like to connect with each other, to find events, to find each other. And so it's basically like Meetup meets Eventbrite meets Thorntree.
Yeah, and it's based on you've introduced to me the massive platform that Travel Massive built and is open source and available for others to potentially use for their purposes. So I'm researching it and learning myself. There's so many things you're involved in. Conferences. This TravelCon is hopeful for September. Is that the
yeah?
That's the plan. And talk about, I had the honor to speak at TravelCon last year. Talk about the event from your perspective as a speaker and a bit of the organizing.
Yeah, I think that I don't do much of the organizing at all. I would say I do like 0.5% of the organizing, if that, if I can even claim that. There are people that work on TravelCon that are not me. But I would say that TravelCon is an incredible event for travel media. It is, you know, we're in our 3rd year now and we just have incredible people coming to teach about like real skills when it comes to being in travel media. So photography, videography, writing, making money, like being a business. And so like sometimes we have someone talk about how to do your taxes or how to publish ebooks or how to run retreats. And it's really nuts and bolts. And I love it. I think it's incredible. And I also think it's invaluable for people that are in the blogging or travel media world, just the amount of people and talent that is all brought together is really inspiring. And it's just really fun. It's a great weekend. It's in New Orleans this September. And so, I mean, hopefully, unless something else happens like outside of our control, we're still taking everything like day by day with the coronavirus. So that's the plan for now. That's what's set for now.
And in prior years, there was a virtual ticket. Will there be a virtual ticket? Okay. All right. So for those that are not planning to travel, or we have no idea what the restrictions will be for those coming from overseas or potentially even other U.S. states that that there will be a virtual ticket option. And I've been to a few conferences, not a huge number. And yeah, full disclosure, I was invited to speak last year, so that was a different perspective. But I did find of the many sessions I attended that the focus on practical skills that you mentioned was quite valuable, because I know we have a debate. I always say the keynotes don't interest me because I'm not the type to go to an inspirational speaker to be inspired, and I can get the canned speech on YouTube, I feel like, and other people are like, oh no, the keynotes of events are the absolute best. We want to see this big shot, and I'm down in the like how to use this Adobe tool breakout session instead. So there's a bit of both of that, and
Yeah.
it was a very well run event.
Yeah, it's actually really fun because there's a lot of authors too. So not just bloggers, it's also like, well, big name authors that come. And so I think it's a very interesting aspect of it is just storytelling, because you have a lot of writers and a lot of storytellers. So they're very interesting talks and keynotes and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm all about the nuts and bolts too. I'm like writing notes, Nargana Karba? Question mark.
I think we'll close there. I can't think of a better way to end with our new tagline. So, thank you, Erica, for joining us today.
Thank you, Stefan. Bye, everyone. Oh, I brought my passport. I feel like I should show this. I feel
All right.
do people do that?
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.